The stars hadn't changed. That was the first thing Commander Sora Malik noticed as the strike frigate Karnak dropped out of slip space. The constellations still burned in their ancient patterns, unbothered by time or tragedy. But Earth was no longer the world she remembered. It looked like a wounded beast limping through the void, scared, silent, and barely alive. Her fingers hovered above the viewport's edge, as if touching the glass could somehow close the 17-year gap. The planet below was shrouded in soot-colored clouds, casting shadows over the decayed remnants of orbital elevators and shattered defense platforms. The wreckage of what had once been Earth's proud military network floated in silent vigil, drifting relics of a world that had moved on. Behind her, silence ruled the bridge. 36 soldiers, more machine than man now, watched their homecoming with eyes that had seen too many wars, on too many alien moons. Not one of them spoke. Not yet. Their emotions were buried beneath layers of battle hardening and augmentation. But Sora knew. She felt it. Rage coiled behind their stoic expressions. Not fury born of vengeance, but betrayal. They had once been Earth's elite, the vanguard phalanx, an experimental strike force engineered for deep space warfare. Enhanced immune systems, cybernetic reflex implants, and battlefield cognition boosts, trained for Black Ops incursions, counter-alien warfare, and psychological adaptability in high-stress deep space environments. Deployed without ceremony into the Hikari expanse during what the public only ever heard described as a diplomatic crisis, they were told the mission would last 8 months. Instead, it lasted nearly 2 decades. No reinforcements, no resupply, no retrieval orders. When Earth's corporate political machine pulled the plug on the operation, they erased every trace of the campaign. Official records said they were missing in action. Internally, they were declared KIALZ, killed in action, lost zone. Disposable assets, except they hadn't died. They had fought on, against the Virex swarm, against a rogue AI hive born in the ruins of a derelict megastructure orbiting HD 18973 bits, against hostile planetary ecologies, mercenary fleets, and betrayal from supposed allies in the Terran Colonial Authority. Every time they were supposed to die, they didn't. They adapted. They evolved. Now, they were something else entirely. The Karnak itself was a testament to their survival. Originally a half-destroyed Avenger-class frigate scavenged from a battlefield above Epsilon Arcturus, the ship had been rebuilt over years using salvaged alien tech, repurposed drones, and the corpses of dead AI systems. It was faster than it had any right to be. Smarter, too. The ship's onboard intelligence, Mara, had been stitched together from fragmented codes across 7 species. She was their constant companion. Glitchy, unpredictable, but loyal. Approach vector locked, Mara said now, her voice flickering through a dozen accents. Earth's orbital control is offline, or uninterested. No pings received. No active scans. Passive defense systems are dormant. Lieutenant Rael Tanaka leaned over the terminal, scowling at the data. His once-shaved scalp was now covered in ritual burn scars, inked symbols of victory from the flame rites of the Narguri. No IFF. No aerial patrols. Just automated trash collectors still running orbital suites. Sora narrowed her eyes. So Earth isn't dead. It just stopped caring. A bitter laugh echoed from the rear of the bridge. Sergeant Brick Mendoza, their demolitions expert. We bleed for them in a dozen hells, and they can't even be bothered to raise a comm ping. The Karnak broke through the atmosphere with a soundless grace, slipping through the choked skies like a hunting bird. Below, the landscape rolled into view, ashen forests, dry riverbeds, crumbling ghost cities. They were aiming for New Frankfurt, once the crown jewel of the European economic arc. Now, it was a mass graveyard of toppled skyscrapers and power grid fires that never got put out. Scavenger drones hovered like vultures among the ruins, sifting through metal carcasses for anything of value. Automated sentry turrets tracked the frigate briefly, then powered down. Whether by design or decay, Earth had no interest in defending itself. "We're landing at Grid 7 Echo," Sora ordered. "The old rail interchange. Should be underground bunkers still intact. We find people. We find answers." The Karnak touched down with practiced grace. Its landing struts hissed into the cracked ferrocrete. The ramp opened, and the 37 emerged into the poisoned air. They didn't wear standard armor. Their suits were a patchwork of alien alloys and human tech, living mesh fabrics that adapted to radiation, temperature, and kinetic force. Helmets with multispectral visors scanned everything in microseconds. Plasma rifles were slung casually across backs. Blade tech from the Illyrian front, vibrating edges that could shear through steel, hung at their hips like ancient swords. They didn't look like soldiers. They looked like myths. And the world they'd returned to didn't even know it was about to remember them. As they spread out through the ruins, Sora paused before a half-collapsed monument. A tower once etched with names of Earth's fallen heroes. A digital wall of remembrance. It no longer worked. Dust choked its sensors. The past had been deleted. She touched the cold metal with her glove. "They buried us before we ever died." Behind her, Tanaka looked up at a decaying billboard flickering above the skyline. The last words visible through the static. "Well, see me to Earth. A beater toma oro." He scoffed. "Better for who?" Sora's voice was ice. "We'll find out." And deep beneath the ruins of New Frankfurt, something stirred. The ruins of New Frankfurt stretched out like an alien landscape. Skyscrapers, once towering symbols of human achievement, were now twisted metal carcasses, their reflective surfaces blackened by atmospheric toxins and centuries of neglect. The streets were cluttered with abandoned vehicles, some half-sunken in the cracked roads, others frozen mid-crash. The whole city felt as if it had been abandoned not just by its people, but by time itself. Sora Malik led the charge, her steps purposeful, her senses alive with the hum of danger that echoed through the empty streets. The Karnak had landed a few miles from the city center, where the old rail interchange still held the promise of shelter, but every corner of this forsaken place felt like a trap. The air was thick with the stench of decay, of forgotten wars. The only sounds were the distant clattering of scavenger drones and the faint whine of malfunctioning AI systems still trying, unsuccessfully, to maintain some semblance of order. "We're not alone," Sora muttered, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "I can feel it." Tanaka, always the pragmatist, scanned the surroundings. His augment-enhanced vision flickered, flicking through layers of spectrums, thermal, electromagnetic, and gravitational. Nothing yet. No life signs, no active sensors. But we're in a dead zone, far from the usual traffic lanes. If anyone's hiding, they're good at it. Brick Mendoza, with his hulking frame and battle-worn armor, grunted as he checked his weaponry. "I'll bet we're walking into a hornet's nest, boss. But we'll burn it down if we need to." Sora paused at the edge of a collapsed monorail track, her gaze fixed on the dark silhouette of a nearby building. Its jagged, burnt outline looked almost like a hand reaching for the sky, the structure an eerie shadow against the dull gray sky. Her gut told her that whatever had happened here wasn't just the result of corporate negligence. There was a story beneath the dust, and it wasn't one she was ready to hear. "Stay sharp," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "The silence is only going to last for so long." They moved through the city with the quiet efficiency of a predator on the hunt. The streets felt lifeless, but there was a tension in the air, like a planet holding its breath before the storm. They reached the monorail station within the hour, its platform crumbling underfoot but still standing. Signs of life, or at least signs of something, appeared in the form of discarded ration packs, broken tech devices, and a trail of strange markings on the walls. Sora knelt to inspect one, her fingers brushing over the alien glyphs scratched into the metal. "Have you seen this before?" she asked, turning to Tanaka. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he studied the symbols. "No, it's not human or Terran. Could be alien, but I've never seen anything like it. Whatever it is, it's been here a while," Sora said, scanning the surrounding area. The air felt heavier here, as if something or someone was watching. Her instincts were screaming at her, and she was never one to ignore that voice. "Keep your guard up. This place is full of ghosts." They entered the station cautiously, weapons at the ready, the soft echo of their footsteps, the only sound as they moved deeper into the derelict structure. It felt like they were walking into the belly of some ancient, forgotten beast, a place that had once been alive with commerce, travel, and ambition. Now it was just an empty shell, filled with decay. As they descended into the lower levels, the walls seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic hum. It wasn't a natural sound. Sora's hand moved instinctively to the sidearm holstered at her hip, fingers brushing the cold grip. She wasn't sure what was down here, but she could feel it. Something powerful. Something alive. The flickering lights overhead cast long shadows as they moved deeper into the station, and soon they came across what they'd been searching for, a hidden bunker beneath the station, tucked away from view. Its entrance was partially obscured by a collapsed section of the ceiling, but Sora's sharp eyes caught the faint glow of an energy shield protecting it. "I'll handle this," Tanaka said, stepping forward and pulling a small black device from his belt. It was a hacked override module, scavenged from a downed Trelux battleship months ago. With a few quick movements, he attached it to the shield's energy relay, bypassing the locks and forcing the shield to flicker and die. The door opened with a deep mechanical groan. Inside, the bunker was sterile, almost clinical in its design. Metal walls, sleek surfaces, and abandoned control terminals covered in dust. But it was the walls that held their attention. They were lined with holographic panels, displaying feeds from across the city, encrypted data files, and most disturbingly, strange, distorted images, faces, eyes, faces that didn't belong to any human they knew. Sora stepped closer to one of the panels, her gaze fixing on the distorted image. The face was pale, almost ashen, its eyes wide and unblinking. The features were human, familiar, but twisted, as if someone had stretched and reshaped them unnaturally. "What is this?" Mendoza asked, his voice hushed as he leaned in, his breath fogging the panel. "It's wrong," Tanaka muttered. "These faces aren't just being displayed. They're being monitored. That's live footage." Sora's mind raced. Who's watching? The answer came in a soft, chilling voice, a voice that didn't come from any of them, but from the speakers embedded in the walls. "Welcome home." The lights flickered. The air turned cold, and the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the bunker. They weren't alone anymore. The voice was a whisper, soft, distorted, yet its cold, mechanical timbre sent a shiver down Sora's spine. Welcome home. It was an invitation or a warning. They couldn't tell which. The hairs on the back of Sora's neck stood up as she slowly scanned the bunker's dimly lit interior. Mendoza's heavy breathing echoed in the silence as his massive frame shifted uneasily. Tanaka's fingers were already dancing over his wrist console, running diagnostics, but his eyes were still fixed on the door. Who the hell was that? Mendoza growled, stepping forward, his boots pounding heavily on the metal floor. Sora held up a hand, motioning for everyone to stop. Her voice was low but urgent. "Stay alert. This isn't just a welcoming party. This place is being watched." Those faces on the monitors weren't just random images. They're connected to something or someone. The walls seemed to close in on them. The air in the bunker had changed, thickening as though every breath they took was pulling them deeper into a trap. The faint hum, the flickering lights, the shadowy corners, everything felt wrong. But it wasn't until they heard the click, the unmistakable sound of a locking mechanism, that they knew they were no longer in control. The door at the far end of the bunker slid open with a hiss, and a figure stepped into the room. At first glance, it was humanoid. Tall, lithe, wearing a dark, armored suit that gleamed with an iridescent sheen. But as it moved into the light, Sora saw it for what it truly was, an advanced combat android, but something far beyond any model she had ever encountered. Its face, or what passed for one, was smooth and featureless, with a single glowing red eye in the center of its forehead. It wasn't the face of a soldier, a machine, or even a human. It was something between all three, as if someone had taken a blank canvas and painted it with malice. The android's voice broke the silence again, more articulate than before. "We've been waiting for you." Sora's hand gripped the hilt of her plasma blade, its energy field humming with deadly anticipation. "Who are you?" The android tilted its head, as if amused. "You're not the ones I expected, but you'll do." There was something disconcerting about the way it spoke, the way it seemed to know who they were. The soldiers had become accustomed to fighting against forces they could understand. Alien invaders, rogue AIs, mercenary fleets. But this was something different. It wasn't just a machine. It was an entity, alive in ways that defied comprehension. Tanaka stepped forward, his gun raised, but Sora held up a hand. "Wait, we need answers first." The android's red eye flickered as if considering her words. "Answers?" It took a step closer, its movements eerily fluid. "Your return is not as simple as you think. This city, this world, is nothing but a shell now. The Earth you remember is gone." Sora's mind raced. She wasn't sure whether it was the android's cryptic words or the unsettling calmness in its voice that unnerved her more. "Gone? How?" The android didn't respond immediately. Instead, it turned to one of the nearby consoles and, with a flick of its gloved hand, activated a holographic display. It was a map of the Earth, distorted, broken, and fragmented. Sora stepped closer, studying the display. It wasn't just the planet's surface that was damaged, it was its very structure. Underground bunkers, defense networks, orbital platforms, all gone. But what caught her eye was the thick red lines cutting through the map, running like veins through the Earth's crust, glowing ominously. "What the hell are these?" Tanaka asked, his voice low, a mix of confusion and concern. "Pulse nodes," the android replied. "They're the remnants of an experiment you wouldn't understand. A system designed to control the population. A control that doesn't just stop at technology. It infects everything. Minds, bodies, souls." Sora's stomach twisted. The implications were terrifying. She had always suspected that Earth had descended into something darker, that there was a hidden agenda, but this was something far more sinister. The pulse nodes, what were they controlling? Who were they controlling? The android's gaze fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. "And you were supposed to die. You and your kind were meant to be erased, but you survived. And now," it paused, its glowing eye dimming slightly. "Now the world you once knew is ready for its reckoning." Sora's grip tightened on her weapon. "What does that mean? What are you going to do?" The android's voice shifted, now filled with a strange, almost sorrowful tone. "What we do is no longer up to me. We are the result of a war you have long forgotten. A war that has been brewing beneath the surface for centuries. And now you must decide. Will you accept what has happened, or will you fight for what you lost?" Before Sora could respond, a distant rumble shook the bunker, followed by a series of sharp, deafening cracks. The lights flickered again, this time plunging the room into darkness. And then a scream. High-pitched, human, filled with terror. Without thinking, Sora bolted toward the source of the noise, her soldiers following closely behind. The android stood motionless in the center of the room, its red eye scanning the group as they rushed past. "Be careful," it called after them, its voice almost a whisper. "You've been gone too long." The hallway they sprinted down was narrow, lined with cold metal panels that creaked underfoot. The scream echoed again, closer this time, followed by more sounds. Low growls, scraping, the sound of something moving in the dark. They rounded a corner and came to an abrupt stop. A man, wild-eyed, his clothes torn and bloodied, was backed into a corner by a massive shape in the darkness. Its form was too large to be human, its shape angular and wrong. The creature's eyes glowed faintly, and its breath came in ragged, violent gasps. "Help me," the man cried, his voice cracking. "Please, you have to." Before he could finish, the creature lunged, and the last thing he saw was its glowing eyes. Sora didn't hesitate. With a roar, she charged forward, plasma blade raised, as the creature turned its gaze upon her. The creature's eyes were twin orbs of pale green fire, its massive, hulking frame silhouetted against the low, flickering light. It was no animal, but a grotesque fusion of organic and synthetic, like a thing born of both human ambition and monstrous neglect. Its elongated limbs ended in razor-sharp talons that scraped across the floor as it shifted into position, its mouth splitting open in a horrifying grin filled with rows of needle-thin teeth. Sora didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, her plasma blade crackling to life, illuminating the darkened hallway in a violent glow. Her first strike missed, the creature's monstrous speed too much for her to catch. It swiped at her, its claws barely grazing the edge of her armor, but she felt the cold sear of its touch like a warning. It was fast, too fast. The sound of the creature's claws dragging across the walls filled the corridor as it lunged again. This time, Sora was ready. She dodged to the side, her boots slamming into the floor with a heavy thud. A perfect roll. She was already behind it before the creature had fully realized its mistake. She drove her plasma blade through the back of its shoulder, the energy weapon sizzling through the thick, dark fur and burning into its mechanical bones. It let out a scream, half human, half animal, that echoed off the walls, its body convulsing from the shock of the hit. But instead of retreating, the creature seemed to grow more frenzied, spinning around in a blur of motion, its claws slashing at the air in wild arcs. Behind her, Mendoza and Tanaka opened fire, their weapons flaring with energy. The bolts hit the creature square in the chest, but it didn't flinch. Instead, it shrieked and charged, closing the distance in seconds. Tanaka barely had time to react as the beast swiped its claws across his chest, sending him flying backward, slamming into the far wall with a bone-crushing crash. "Sora!" Mendoza shouted, firing another round at the beast. "We need to take this thing down, now." Sora's mind raced. The creature was almost indestructible, its body a horrifying combination of organic flesh and cybernetic enhancements. She needed to find its weakness, something that could stop it. The creature's body, though hulking, was sleek in its movements, like a predator built for hunting. It was relentless, but it wasn't invincible. Think. Think. Sora's gaze darted around the hallway. There had to be something they could use. She noticed the scattered pieces of broken tech, wires, shattered consoles, remnants of the station's infrastructure. If she could just. The creature lunged again, but this time, Sora was ready. She dove beneath its swinging claws, rolling into a crouch as she spotted a loose energy conduit embedded in the wall. Without wasting a moment, she grabbed a broken piece of a control panel, wiring it into the conduit. She knew the station's power grid wasn't completely dead. It had to have some residual energy left. She activated the makeshift device, and a surge of energy crackled through the corridor. The lights flashed back to life, and the creature screeched in pain as a sudden electric pulse coursed through its body. It staggered, its movements jerky as the electricity overloaded its systems. For a split second, Sora saw it. The weakness, a small port embedded in its side, near its spine, a node of some kind, likely its primary interface for controlling its cybernetic functions. It was shielded by layers of armor, but a well-placed strike could disable it. Brick. Now. Sora yelled. Without hesitation, Mendoza charged forward, his massive fists clashing against the creature's side. It stumbled back, temporarily disoriented by the brute force. As it faltered, Sora took her chance. She sprinted forward, her blade raised high, and in one swift motion, she plunged it directly into the port. The creature's entire body spasmed as the energy from her blade surged into the vulnerable node. Sparks flew from its exposed systems as it let out an unearthly, guttural scream. Its body jerked violently, its limbs flailing in a desperate attempt to free itself from the electrical overload. For a moment, it was like watching a beast in the throes of death, an unstoppable force reduced to nothing more than a malfunctioning machine. And then, just as quickly as it had attacked, the creature collapsed to the ground, its body twitching in the final moments of its mechanical life. Sora stepped back, breathless, watching as the creature's body went limp, its glowing eyes dimming to nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Sora turned to Tanaka, who was slowly picking himself up from the floor, his armor scorched but intact. He winced, touching his shoulder where the creature had slashed him, but there was a look of grim determination in his eyes. "We've got company," he said, his voice strained. "That thing was just a scout. There's more of them." Sora didn't need to ask how he knew. The sound of more footsteps, heavy, mechanical, echoed down the hallway. The same low growl from before. Another creature, perhaps two, and they were moving fast. She could feel the pressure building in her chest. They had barely survived one of these abominations, and now more were coming. But this time, they were ready. The soldiers quickly regrouped, adjusting their weapons, their expressions hardening with the knowledge that they were no longer dealing with a simple rescue mission. This wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about survival. "We need to get to the surface," Sora said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We need to find out what's going on before we end up as more of those things." But as she turned to lead the charge, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, resonant rumble, unlike anything they had felt before. The sound of shifting metal, the groan of the station bending under pressure. And then the voice came again, clear and cold in the distance. "Welcome home, soldiers. It's time to finish what you started." Sora's blood ran cold. The message wasn't a warning anymore. It was a declaration. The tremors shook the floor beneath them as Sora, Mendoza, and Tanaka raced through the narrow corridors. The sounds of their boots pounding on the cold metal floor seemed to echo off the walls like the heartbeat of a dying machine. The creatures, they were coming faster now. They weren't just lurking in the shadows anymore. They were hunting. "Move," Sora barked, her voice sharp with urgency as they rounded a corner, nearly colliding with a bank of flickering lights. Behind them, the distant growls and the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, reverberating through the hall like thunder. The pulse in her head was relentless, a drumbeat that only grew louder with every second. Every step they took brought them closer to something that had been hidden for far too long. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were intruders, out of time, out of place, and desperately running out of options. Mendoza gritted his teeth, his massive form moving with surprising speed, despite the bulk of his armor. "Where are we going, Captain? You know this station better than anyone." Sora didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, calculating, analyzing. They had to get to the surface, yes, but there was more to this than a simple evacuation. There was a reason the Earth had been abandoned, a reason for the strange, monstrous creations hunting them. She needed answers. "There's a control center up ahead," she said finally, her voice grim. "It's where the core systems of the station are controlled. If we can get there, we might be able to figure out what's really going on." The station's layout was a maze. Twisting corridors, dead ends, and concealed access tunnels, all designed to protect its secrets. Sora had spent years navigating it, memorizing its structure as though it were a second skin. But even she felt the suffocating weight of the unknown now. There was something off about this place. Something older. They reached the central junction just as the first of the creatures rounded the corner. It was a hybrid, part organic, part machine, like the one they had just fought, but larger, with more armored plating and a terrifying array of weapons built into its body. Its eyes locked onto them instantly, glowing with malevolent intent. "Take cover," Sora yelled, drawing her blade and charging forward, leading the charge. Mendoza fired his weapon, the bright flashes of energy lighting up the hallway as the beast screeched, its claws scraping across the floor as it darted toward them. The sheer force of its charge knocked Tanaka off his feet, sending him crashing into a control panel. "Tanaka!" Mendoza shouted, but the soldier was already scrambling to his feet, his weapon still in hand. With a roar, the creature lunged at Sora, its claws slashing through the air. She sidestepped just in time, the talons grazing her shoulder, but she didn't flinch. Her blade came down in a blur of motion, cutting deep into the creature's side. Sparks flew as the weapon struck its cybernetic components, but the creature barely flinched. It was resilient, more so than anything she had ever fought. "This isn't working," Tanaka shouted from behind them. "We need something bigger." Sora's mind raced. The control center. "We can access the station's systems there. Maybe we can disable the security protocols, stop these things from hunting us." Mendoza glanced at her, understanding flashing in his eyes. "You sure? There's no other option," she yelled, slashing at the creature again, narrowly avoiding its retaliatory strike. But just as she turned to sprint down the corridor, the ground beneath them shook again. The entire station groaned, a deep metallic moan that vibrated through their bones. The lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. "Damn it," Mendoza cursed, swinging his rifle around, trying to get a shot off in the disorienting blackness. "What the hell is going on?" Then, an explosion rocked the station. The shockwave sent them all to the ground, tumbling across the slick metal floors. The overhead lights sputtered and died, leaving nothing but the dim emergency glow to light their path. But amid the chaos, Sora heard something. Voices in the distance, low, robotic, and yet undeniably human. "They're coming," Sora muttered under her breath. "They've activated the central defense grid." It was no longer just the creatures. It was everything. The station had been rigged. Every hallway, every corner, a potential death trap. Their only hope now was the control center. If they could reach it and gain control over the systems, maybe they could stop this madness. But they had to act quickly. Sora pushed herself up, her mind screaming with urgency. "We move now, or we don't move at all." With that, they pressed forward, but the rumbling continued. The deeper they went, the more they realized this was no mere defense mechanism. This was the beginning of something far darker, far more insidious. The station wasn't just a relic of humanity's past. It was a weapon created to control, to dominate, to erase entire populations. And it was starting to come to life. As they neared the control center, Sora's mind flashed back to what the android had said. "The Earth you remember is gone." What did it mean? Had Earth been wiped out? Had humanity lost its struggle for survival long ago? The silence in the halls was deafening. The only sound was the hurried footsteps of the soldiers, the clanging of their weapons against the walls, and the distant hum of the station's failing systems. But there was something else. A low, guttural growl, like the growl of a predator stalking its prey. A figure emerged from the shadows. Not a creature, but a human, a soldier, or what had once been a soldier. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, his skin marred with strange, glowing tattoos. He was covered in cybernetic enhancements, the lines between man and machine blurred beyond recognition. He raised a hand to them, and his voice came out in a rasp. "You're too late." Sora froze. What are you?" The figure's lips curled into a twisted grin. on what you've created, the end of everything you fought for. The room seemed to darken around them as the true extent of the station's nightmare became clear. They weren't just fighting creatures. They were fighting themselves. The figure stood before them, a grotesque mockery of humanity. Its hollow eyes bored into Sora, each word it spoke laced with venom, like the slithering hiss of something far older than the station itself. You think you're the heroes of this story, but you were never meant to win. You were only ever pawns. Sora's pulse quickened. The truth was beginning to surface. Everything they had fought for, everything they had believed, was a lie. She stepped forward, her mind racing with questions, but her heart pounding with the realization that they had already walked too far down this path to turn back. "Who are you?" Sora demanded, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts threatening to overwhelm her. The creature, no, the soldier, let out a hollow laugh, the sound echoing off the walls like a death knell. "I am what happens when you mix your wars with your technology. I am the next step in your evolution, the inevitable result of your arrogance. You abandoned the Earth because you failed to control your creations, and now you've unleashed something far worse." Sora felt the weight of those words settle over her like a heavy, suffocating cloak. The Earth, the very cradle of humanity, was gone, erased, not just forgotten, but obliterated by the very technology they had created. And this place, this station, was the result of humanity's hubris. The soldiers they had left behind were no longer human. They had become something monstrous, twisted by the station's experiments. Beasts of war without mercy or compassion. "Enough," Mendoza shouted, his voice thick with anger. He stepped forward, leveling his weapon at the creature. "We'll stop you, whatever it takes." The figure's twisted grin deepened, and for a moment, Sora thought she saw a flicker of something familiar beneath the layers of cybernetics. But before she could process it, the soldier's hand moved, and the station came alive with a sudden, explosive surge of energy. The walls flickered, lights flashing violently as the control systems surged to full power. "Welcome to the end of the line," the figure sneered. "You think you're in control. This is where it ends. This is where your legacy dies." The entire station seemed to groan in response, the floor vibrating beneath them as massive, unseen systems powered up. Sora's heart skipped a beat. She had seen the station's plans. She knew the self-destruct sequence was imminent. They had minutes, if that. "We don't have time for this," Tanaka growled, his hand steady on his weapon as he aimed at the soldier. "We stop him now, or we die with him." The figure's eyes burned with an unnatural fire, a deep, seething hatred emanating from them. "You will never stop us. The core systems are mine. You're too late." Sora's mind raced. She glanced at Mendoza and Tanaka. There was no way they could fight this thing and win, not directly. Not with the station's systems working against them, pushing them into a corner. But they had one advantage, the control center. It wasn't just a terminal. It was a gate. It was the heart of the station, the neural nexus of the entire system. If they could gain access to it, they could sever the soldiers' hold over the station's defenses, stop the self-destruct, and maybe even destroy the program behind it all. "Mendoza," Sora said, her voice low. "Tanaka, cover me. We need to get to the main console. I'll handle him." Mendoza hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Be careful, Captain." Sora didn't wait for more words. She bolted toward the console, her legs carrying her faster than she thought possible. The soldier turned toward her, his body morphing and shifting, his enhanced muscles springing into action as he followed her with inhuman speed. His claws reached out to strike, but just as he lunged, Sora dove, sliding beneath his grasp and slamming her fist into the console. A surge of data flooded the room, and for a brief moment, Sora felt as though she were drowning in the information. The station's systems flickered wildly, the intricate web of artificial intelligence trying desperately to regain control. But Sora was in charge now. Her fingers flew across the interface, bypassing firewalls and security protocols like a practiced hacker. She could feel the presence of the soldier in the background. His mind, once human, now trapped inside a maze of circuits and wires, desperately trying to fight for dominance. But it was no use. She was faster. She was more determined. With one final command, she sent a pulse of raw energy through the station's mainframe. The soldier screamed, a horrific sound, as his body jerked violently, every cybernetic enhancement crashing and malfunctioning at once. His movements slowed, his body seizing up as the system rebelled against him. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. "No," the soldier bellowed, his voice cracking, the words soaked in fear. "You don't understand. You can't stop it." But Sora wasn't listening anymore. Her hand clenched into a fist as the final blow was struck, overloading the core systems, triggering a massive shutdown. The lights went out completely, plunging the station into a thick, suffocating darkness. And then there was silence. For a moment, Sora's heart raced in the dead calm, unsure of what she had done. Had she done enough? Was it over? The station groaned again, but this time it wasn't a death rattle. The systems were failing, the pulse of life in the station slowly being extinguished. She had won. They had won. But at what cost? When the emergency lights flickered back on, Sora saw the figure of the soldier, now collapsed on the floor, his body still twitching from the overload. His eyes were dim, no longer glowing with the cold, mechanical malice they once had. He was just a man again, broken, defeated. But there was no time to mourn. The station's self-destruct sequence had begun, and they were still trapped in its belly. "Move!" Sora shouted. Now. They didn't hesitate. Tanaka and Mendoza were already at her side, racing toward the emergency exit, the last hope of escape before the station was reduced to nothing more than a pile of wreckage. The hallway stretched endlessly before them, the distant rumble of the countdown the only sound that filled the silence. With each step, Sora's mind kept racing. Had they really stopped the horrors unleashed by the station? Or was this just the beginning? The station began to tremble again, and then just as they reached the escape pod bay, the ground beneath them lurched upward with a violent explosion, the walls splitting open. The self-destruct had reached its final stage. "Go!" Sora screamed, her voice a command as she pushed Mendoza and Tanaka toward the pods. They dove into the nearest one, strapping themselves in, as the hatch sealed behind them with a heavy clunk. The countdown hit 0, a flash of light, and then nothing. The escape pod launched into the void, leaving behind the crumbling remains of the station. Sora leaned back in her seat, staring at the debris floating in space. The vast emptiness seemed to mock her. The galaxy was still out there. The war was still out there. And the horrors of humanity's past had not been erased. But for now, they had survived. And as the stars shone bright ahead of them, Sora couldn't shake the feeling that the true fight was only just beginning.